My husband and his mistress killed my entire family for the inheritance. Victor and I were a loving couple for 6 years. In the end, I was used by him and his mistress as a test subject, schemed against, tortured, and died as a result. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn into the body of his cheap cousin. I used all my cunning and means to successfully seduce him. The mistress knelt before me, crying bitterly. She even swallowed a handful of sleeping pills to threaten suicide. But I just looked on coldly. It was only when she convulsed all over, foaming at the mouth, her hands gripping my pant leg desperately begging me to save her, that I coldly withdrew my foot from her pleading and hopeful gaze. At that time, I begged you the same way. I was reborn. Looking at the face in the mirror, confusion and shock flashed in my eyes. Slightly curved willow leaf eyebrows, a pair of peach blossom eyes. Even in lifelessness, the shifting gaze still revealed a hint of charm. The lips were pale, with a touch of frailty. This was clearly the face of Victor's adopted sister. She was a child taken in and raised alongside Victor from a young age. After returning to find her biological parents, she went abroad. She had admired Victor since childhood. Before she went abroad, she often caused trouble for our relationship. The sensation of the drug being pushed into her body and the bone-gnawing pain that followed, along with the lingering fear and despair of death, still remained in her heart. I looked at the still unhealed scar on my forehead, my fingers gently brushing over it through the gauze, a cold sneer forming in my heart. Since fate has given me a second chance, I will surely make them pay the price. While waiting for Victor to pick me up, I had already calmly accepted the current situation. The original self had deliberately come from abroad to attend my funeral. Overjoyed, she missed a step on the stairs and fainted on the spot, which gave me the opportunity to take over. Ivy, are you sure you're okay? Do you want to stay a little longer? Lillian grabbed my hand as soon as she came in, her worry evident in her eyes. I looked at her kind and gentle expression, a cold sneer rising in my heart. A week ago, she had a face as cold as a venomous snake, saying, "Go to hell. You should have given up this position long ago. Living is just a burden. You don't know, do you?" On your wedding day, Victor said he had company matters to attend to, but he actually came to me. Victor and I have been childhood sweethearts. You can't compare. His pursuit of you is only because you are the pampered daughter of a wealthy family, both foolish and easily deceived, and an only child. Oh, by the way, the car accident involving your parents was arranged by us. What is mine is your property, and the 7-month-old child you were carrying was also caused to be aborted by Victor drugging you. And you still blame yourself for not being able to protect it. It's truly laughable. As she spoke, she forced an unknown liquid into my body. Even though I writhed on the ground in pain, begging for mercy, she did not relent in the slightest. In the end, she forced me to jump off a building and publicly claimed that I was habitually unfaithful, attempting to transfer assets and run away with my lover. When Victor found out, he was so ashamed and furious that he jumped to his death. But at that time, the child in Lillian's womb was already almost 3 months old. It's nothing, Sister Lillian. I forced down the deep-seated hatred, curling my lips into a faint smile, though in my heart I wished I could tear her apart limb by limb immediately. The door to the room was pushed open again, this time by Victor. He paused for a moment when he looked up. I stood against the light, wearing a white long dress, my hair lightly pinned up, revealing a face untouched by makeup. When I saw him, I stepped forward, then stepped back, no longer clinging to him like before. I only showed a pale smile and timidly called out, "Victor," with a mix of longing and the necessary distance. Whether it was the angle of the smile at the corner of my mouth or my expression, I controlled it perfectly. After knowing Victor for so many years, I knew exactly what kind of woman he liked. Moreover, I was a childhood friend who was deeply obsessed with him. In his heart, there was more or less something different. Sure enough, a flicker of tenderness flashed in his eyes. "It's good that you're okay. Lillian keenly sensed something was wrong, and her smile faded a little. As if to assert her claim, she held Victor's hand. Then let's go. I looked at their clasped hands with shattered eyes, then lowered my gaze and stopped speaking. Taking advantage of the wound on my head that hadn't healed yet, I temporarily stayed at Victor's house. Looking at the all-too-familiar house before me, a flash of hatred crossed my eyes, but I quickly concealed it. I wanted to hold his hand, but just as I reached out, I timidly withdrew it and quietly asked, "Am I still staying in the previous room?" Victor raised his hand to rub my head, comforting me. "No need to be so formal with me, just like before. The wound on your forehead hasn't fully healed yet. Stay in a sun-facing room. The one next to mine is quite good." After he spoke, Lillian showed a disapproving expression. "Victor, we agreed to keep that room for the child." She stopped mid-sentence, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. A surge of overwhelming hatred welled up in my heart, my eyes fixed tightly on her belly. Once, I had a child too. Thanks to this pair of despicable people before me, my child has left me forever. When he left my body, he was already fully formed. The feeling of that life force and warmth draining from my body, gradually drowned by despair, is something I will never forget in this lifetime. "It's still early, why rush?" Victor frowned slightly. Though his expression and tone remained unchanged, I knew he was already growing impatient inside. Lillian's face turned pale for a moment, and she didn't say anything more. After packing her luggage, she left the room just in time for mealtime. Lillian was busy bustling around the kitchen, while Victor's mother sat on the sofa, crossing her legs and watching TV. Seeing me come down, she quickly got up to help me. "Are you all packed?" I nodded obediently. The meal was ready, but without waiting for Lillian to come to the table, Victor's mother sat down by herself. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her expression falter for a moment before she turned and went back into the kitchen to busy herself. Victor's mother was a complete wicked mother-in-law, extremely petty, yet in everything she tried to emulate a noble lady. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was Empress Dowager Cixi. After I married in, I cooked 3 meals a day. There had to be 4 dishes and 1 soup, with a balance of meat and vegetables and proper nutrition. She never waited for anyone to eat. She would finish on her own, toss down her chopsticks, and go back to her room to sleep. I had cried to Victor countless times about this. At first, he would hold me and comfort me. "Mom came from a wealthy family, so she's particular about meals. You've worked hard, wife. Let me rub your shoulders." Later on, she gradually became impatient. "Is it really that tiring to cook a little at home? If you can't even cook, what kind of woman are you? Whose wife doesn't cook or take care of her mother-in-law? Are you the only one being fussy? I already work hard outside. Can you stop arguing with me over every little thing?" It seems that now it's her turn to live this kind of life. Victor's mother tasted every dish and finally flicked her chopsticks, the sound piercing the silent air. I lowered my head, a slight smile at the corner of my mouth, calmly watching Lillian stand awkwardly at the door. "What is this? Don't you know I have high blood pressure? Making it so salty. Do you want to kill your old wife? You're such a grown-up. You can't even cook. I don't know what Victor sees in you. You're not even as good as Evelyn. Make it all over again." As she spoke, she raised her hand and threw the entire table of dishes onto the floor. The sound of breaking bowls and plates echoed in the room for a long time. Lillian came out with red eyes, apologizing as she picked up the shards. I seemed to see myself in her. I remember our first wedding anniversary. I specially prepared a big table full of dishes and a carefully arranged candlelight dinner. Wearing a slip dress, I waited for Victor to come home. Unexpectedly, it was Victor's mother who showed up. She grabbed my clothes, her fists landing on my chest and stomach. "Dressing so revealing. Who are you trying to seduce? Are you secretly cheating on my son? I'll beat you to death, you shameless woman. Cheating right under my roof. Do you think I'm an old woman who's dead? I'll kick you to death." She tore at my clothes and even took out her phone to record a video. If Victor hadn't come home early, she would have opened the door and invited the neighbors to watch. That time, I was determined to get a divorce. It was Victor who knelt before me, begging for 2 hours, and forced his mother to apologize to me, promising to send her back to her hometown. Only then did I calm down. Later, I found out it was Lillian who showed her a photo I took of a plumber I had brought home, claiming I was bringing some shady men back. Now I slowly curled my lips. She deserved it. She insisted on putting so much effort to jump into this fire pit. Victor followed me into the kitchen. The two whispered for a while. I saw Lillian wiping her tears, standing on tiptoe to kiss his lips. I knew she had been comforted. He came out, picked up the car keys, and said, "I still have a meeting, so I won't eat. I'm leaving first." This was because he was annoyed. He always liked to find an excuse to go out and disappear quietly whenever there was a conflict between me and his mother. I also stood up, lifted my bare face without makeup, my pupils wide open, with an expression both expectant and cautiously inquiring. "Victor, can you give me a ride? I'm going to change my dressing." He curled his lips, rubbed the top of my head with his big hand, then tidied the hair he had messed up for me. Ivy's request. As her brother, I naturally must comply with any demand. Through the mirror, I saw Lillian with a sullen face, staring fixedly at my back. Taking the opportunity to grab my bag, I turned and smiled at her. Victor personally took me to the hospital to change the dressing. Clutching his hand tightly through the pain, he looked at me with concern, his brown eyes reflecting my current state. My little face was scrunched up, biting my lower lip hard from the pain. An inexplicably pitiful sight. After the dressing was changed, I casually used his hand to wipe away the tears at the corner of my eyes. "Sorry, I'm used to it." When I used to cry, Victor would always wipe them away like this. A faint blush colored my cheeks, shy yet tinged with the sadness and nostalgia of past memories. He raised his hand to dry my tears. "You don't have to be so formal with me anymore." Then, with a meaningful look, he added, "Just like before is fine." A flash of joy passed through my eyes as I held his arm and gently swayed it from side to side. "Really?" The soft touch seemed to brush lightly over his arm. His Adam's apple bobbed as he gave a soft hum. Judging by his expression, I knew. The fish was about to take the bait. The original self studied finance and management abroad. Using this as an excuse, I begged Victor to take me to work and learn alongside him. After Mom and Dad's car accident, the company has been managed by my foster brother. Such a vast fortune can't be handed over to outsiders. I think I have to grow up eventually. After speaking, the smile on my face faded a little, and my eyes uncontrollably reddened, glistening as I looked at him. "No way." Lillian was the first to object, her voice sharp and piercing, like a dog whose tail had been stepped on. Seeing everyone looking over, I belatedly realized my reaction was too intense and stammered out an explanation. "Victor is too busy. If Ivy wants to study, she can switch to another company. Victor knows so many people." Victor's mother looked over with a sullen face and interrupted with a tone of dissatisfaction. "How do you speak? After teaching you so many times, you still can't learn? I've told you hundreds of times that a woman should speak gently and softly. You can't shout at your own husband. Have you forgotten all your manners? Coming from a small family, you're just not the same as a proper lady. You really can't compare to Ivy in the slightest. Why did Victor marry a woman like you again?" Each word hit Lillian harder, her face growing paler and paler. I touched Victor's mother's hand, a slight smile curling at the corner of my mouth. "Sister Lillian is great too. I heard that all those pharmaceutical developments at Victor's company are led by her. Really impressive. If Sister Lillian weren't outstanding, why would Victor like her so much?" It was fine if I didn't mention it, but once I did, Victor's mother's expression worsened. She always believed that men should work outside and women should stay at home, and she looked down on women like her who relied on their sons for status. She firmly believed that her son could find a more outstanding and wealthy proper lady. All you know are some cheap, unpresentable coquettish tricks. Saying this, her sharp gaze scanned the already swollen belly. You better pray that the first child is a son, or else All the threats were condensed into that cold snort. Lillian didn't dare to argue and could only look at Victor pitifully, begging him to say a word for her. However, he had become too comfortable being the invisible man, and he knew very well how difficult his mother was to deal with. She would never bring trouble upon herself. All right, that's enough. So, Victor brushed off the matter with a light remark. Then he turned to me and asked, Ivy, come to the company to report tomorrow. Sure. I cheered and threw myself into his arms, acting spoiled. Thank you, brother. Lillian's face darkened with a grim smile, her hands clenched tightly together. She held back again and again, but still couldn't contain herself. Ivy is already this grown, yet still like this. It's not very appropriate. There should be a distinction between men and women. Upon hearing this, my body stiffened, and I slowly sat up straight, lowering my head. I hadn't yet managed to say an apology when Victor's mother opened her mouth and unleashed a torrent of words. Your heart is so dirty. You see filth everywhere. Do you think everyone is as scheming and shameless as you? Ivy and Victor grew up together. They're like siblings, so whatever they have, it's none of your business. Don't forget, you haven't even set foot in my house yet, so don't meddle too much. After speaking, she gave her a warning glare, then kindly took my hand and advised, Ivy, just focus on learning from your brother. If there's anything you don't understand, ask Victor. You don't need to worry about anything else. I slowly curled my lips and looked straight at Lillian. Worried, I asked, at this rate, Lillian, won't she get angry? Don't worry about it. If anyone gossips again, just tell me. I have plenty of strength and ways to handle it. Okay, Mom. I pronounced the last two words with heavy emphasis. Sure enough, the woman in my peripheral vision was about to pinch her skin raw. Lillian, pregnant, worked as a housekeeper at Victor's house, yet she could only call her Victor's wife. Since I started interning at Victor's company, Lillian had been coming over more and more often. If it wasn't soup today, it was a lovingly made lunchbox tomorrow. But all these meals ended up in my stomach because I casually complained that the cafeteria food was bad. Victor even asked her to make an extra portion for me. After eating my fill, I nestled into the office sofa to rest, watching Lillian with red-rimmed eyes, gritting her teeth in hatred towards me. The hatred swirling in her eyes was one I knew all too well. My gaze fell on her swollen belly. 5 months along already. Soon, very soon, I will be able to personally avenge my child. Break time was over, and I reluctantly left the office. As expected, Lillian was already waiting at my desk. She clenched the photo I had placed on the table with resentment, and when she saw me come in, she sneered softly, shameless. My own sister harboring such filthy thoughts about her brother. I snatched it from her hand, lowered my eyes, and gently stroked it with my fingers, asking in return, I don't understand what you're saying, Lillian. What's wrong with siblings having a close photo together? Unexpectedly, she stood up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, pointed at my nose, and scolded, Siblings? What family takes photos of siblings kissing like that? I advise you to be sensible. Before she finished speaking, I suddenly took a step back and fell to the ground. Her eyes instantly turned red, and she looked at her tearfully, pleading, if Sister Lillian doesn't like me, you can just say it directly. I definitely won't embarrass myself or be a bother to you anymore. I just can't bear to be away from Mom and my brother. We haven't seen each other for years. I have no other relatives left. Why can't you let me stay with them a little longer? Just a few days, please. By the end, her voice was choked with sobs. Footsteps behind me quickened, and soon someone helped me up. Are you okay, Ivy? I fearfully hid behind him, looking anxiously at Lillian. After a long moment, I spoke. I think I twisted my ankle. It's not Sister Lillian's fault. I just lost my balance. She lunged forward and grabbed Victor's hand, tears sliding down her face, which had grown fuller from pregnancy. She shook her head desperately. I didn't push her. Victor, please believe me. The pitiful and helpless look was exactly like the me back then. But the latter's eyes flashed with disgust, coldly pulling her hand away. Lillian, don't use your shameful dirty tricks on Ivy. This is just a warning this time. Next time there won't be one. His cold gaze swept over her, sharp as a knife, piercing her lips pale. Go back. Without my permission, you are not allowed to come to the company anymore. Hearing this, Lillian exploded like an atomic bomb. Not allowed to come. Your company. If it weren't for me, would there even be a today? I work day and night on experiments, bearing all the risks. Victor's slap cut off all her words in her throat. Are you sober now? If not, go wash your face yourself. She held her right cheek, eyes wide in disbelief as she looked at the man in front of her. The man she had admired for over 10 years, the one she had painstakingly won over. Victor knew the slap was excessive, sighed, and then pulled her into his arms to comfort her. I was just worried you'd say something you shouldn't in a moment of anger. Sorry, wife, the company's been driving me crazy lately, so I lost my temper for a moment. How about I come home and kneel on the washboard for you? I won't go to work tomorrow. I'll spend the whole day with you as an apology. Should I buy you a bag too? I remember my Lillian used to be so gentle, lovely, and understanding. How did she become so feisty after having a child? When will you give me back the Lillian I love? It turns out, he was the same with Lillian. First, he hits you with a stick, then offers a sweet date, and finally brainwashes you. Lillian just fell for it. Her face was still red and swollen, paired with a shy smile that was painfully endearing. She stood on tiptoe to kiss Victor's lips, then I'll make dinner and wait for you to come back. Then, she raised her eyebrows at me, her eyes sparkling with challenge. After everyone left, Victor wearily rubbed his brow and carried me into the office. She's really getting more and more unreasonable. I looked at the man crouching before me, carefully massaging my ankle, and spoke with envy. Sister Lillian is something else, still running to the company often even though she's pregnant. When I have a husband, I'll just stay home to take care of my mother-in-law and leave the company to him. I won't have to worry about it. Who manages the company now? Dad's adopted son. He said he'll hand it over to me when I get married or can handle things on my own. I remember the group has a targeted drug that works really well. Watching Ewer step by step walk into the trap, I happily squinted my eyes. Yes, only our family holds the production patent. Victor smiled and didn't continue the conversation. I'll take you home in a bit. Rest at home these couple of days. If you feel unwell, call me. If you want to eat or drink anything, I'll bring it back for you. I looked at my slightly swollen ankle. Thank you, Victor. You're so thoughtful. After saying that, I spoke softly and gently. Lillian is really lucky to marry you and have your children. He stood up, smiling as he rubbed my head. Maybe you're lucky too. I was stunned for a moment, then suddenly grabbed his hand and pressed my face against it. I don't want an arranged marriage with anyone else, Victor. Please help me. Not trusting others, Victor personally took me home. Before getting off, I suddenly leaned forward and kissed his profile, then jumped out of the car like a rabbit. The next second, I fell to the ground with a scream. Forgot you were injured? Victor hurriedly picked me up. I buried my face in his chest and mumbled, forgot, I guess. Seeing my shy demeanor, he let out a few chuckles from his throat. You had the guts to kiss me, but not the guts to face me? Where was that courage back then? Hearing this, I lifted my head and looked at him with bright eyes. Then I kissed him again, speaking sweetly, I still dare. Victor was stunned for a moment, his expression gradually turning serious. You need to think this through. I've been married once, and now I have a girlfriend and a child who is also your foster brother. If we were to be together. Do you like Ivy? I interrupted him stubbornly, looking at him intently. Victor was silent for a moment, then nodded. Lillian and I, that was a mistake made after drinking. She got pregnant that time, and I only feel responsible for her. A faint smile poured from my eyes. Then I'm not afraid. I also feel that Sister Lillian, whether in appearance or background, doesn't deserve you and won't bring you any benefit in the future. I'm different. My parents left me a fortune and a corporation, all of which can be my dowry. Most importantly, we grew up together as childhood sweethearts, knowing each other inside and out, as familiar as can be. I already missed my chance with you once before, letting you marry Evelyn. You treated her so well, yet she not only cheated but also tried to transfer the assets. This time, I can't trust anyone else to love you. Give me a chance, please, brother. The last few words were spoken as I fought back nausea, my lips pressed against his. Desire rolled in his eyes as he whispered hoarsely, "All right." Then he added, "Tomorrow I'll have Lillian abort the child, and then." I reached out and covered his mouth. "No need. Let her give birth. As long as it's Victor's child, I will treat it as my own. If she got beaten, how could I personally take revenge?" Once my foot healed, I immediately bought a plane ticket back home and told them about my marriage to Victor. He was supposed to accompany me, but I refused. After landing, I eagerly opened the hidden app on my phone, and sure enough, there were several new recordings. It was Lillian, sharp and trembling, piercing through the eardrums. "You're going to marry her. What about me? What about the child in my belly? I've followed you for 4 years without status or name. Is this how you treat me? Be quiet." I can't be quiet. I've done so many despicable things for you. Now the child is already 5 months old, and you keep delaying the marriage, and soon you'll marry that little bitch. How do you expect me to be quiet? I'm telling you, Victor. If you make things hard for me, I won't let you off either. Don't forget what happened in the lab. Don't forget about Evelyn. If you dare betray me, I'll kill that little bitch first, then we'll perish together. Before she could finish, a sharp slap rang out, and the world suddenly fell silent. You're becoming more and more unreasonable. Look at you. Where is the talented Peking University woman you once were? You're no different from a shrew. The competition is fierce now, the market is sluggish, and Evelyn's inheritance has almost been lost. Ivy is the only daughter in her family. Her parents died in a car accident, leaving her a large sum of money. Most importantly, she has a corporation. Then, if we can get the patents for those targeted drugs, our position in the country will be unbeatable. You don't like it? Then the child will be born and live a life of hiding and running with us. Lillian was silent for a long time, sighed, and compromised. So, what do you want to do? Marry her, gain her trust, trick her into making a will, then deal with her the way we did with Evelyn. After she dies, won't all the money be ours? Victor's tone twisted with excitement. She's your dear little sister. Can you bear it? Lillian sneered. Of course, in this world, only money and you are on the same side as me. Fine, but she can't get pregnant. If you dare betray me, I will expose everything and ruin you forever. Thank you for understanding, my dear wife. I swear I will never waver in my love for you. After listening to all the voice messages, I sneered and saved the recordings in a private file. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, the wedding day had arrived. Victor smiled in the hall, watching me attend in full dress, walking step by step into the trap he had prepared. Little did he know this was also the death trap I had set for him. Victor successfully obtained the production patent for the targeted drug, and with it, the company reached new heights. I was pleased to see this happen. After all, it would all eventually belong to me. Lillian's belly grew bigger and bigger. Victor's mother had someone consult a fortune teller who said it was twins in the womb, unfortunately both girls. But the fortune teller claimed to have a secret recipe that would guarantee a boy. Happily, she no longer asked Lillian to cook and hired several nannies instead. She forced her to drink tonic soups made from secret recipes, as if her life depended on it. In just a month, She had become so fat that she needed help walking. I stood upstairs, watching her being supported like a fat penguin as she walked in the yard. My gaze fell coldly on her belly. Calculating the time, it was about right. Soon it was time for another prenatal checkup. Several doctors looked at the scans repeatedly and then exclaimed in horror, "The fetus has stopped developing. Abort immediately." Victor's mother was adamantly opposed. She was convinced that the hospital was fabricating lies just for money. After returning home, she brought in a fortune teller. The master calculated with his fingers and said the child was still alive, so she should rest assured and wait for the birth. Victor's mother then beamed with joy and urged her to hurry and drink the soup. I sent the person out of the villa and, at parting, stuffed a big bag of things into their hands. 3 weeks later, the child was born. It was the boy they had been longing for. Fair and tender, very cute in appearance, looking exactly like Victor. Unfortunately, both were stillborn. Victor's mother firmly believed that naturally born children were smarter, so she hired a doctor and insisted that she give birth at home by herself. The result was heavy bleeding, and she was rushed to the hospital. When I heard the news, I hurried anxiously to the hospital. Fortunately, she survived. It's just a pity that her uterus was removed, and she lost the ability to be a mother forever. I stood by the hospital bed. After she woke up, her eyes rolled around a few times, not seeing the person she wanted to see. Disappointment and heartbreak flashed in her eyes. "Does it hurt?" I slowly curled my lips. The despair of carrying a child for 8 months, eagerly awaiting, only to give birth to a stillborn. The helplessness of having her uterus removed and opening her eyes to find no one by her pillow. Now I am returning all of that to her. Who asked you to pretend to be kind? Haven't you been secretly delighted all along? You'd rather my child die, you'd rather I die too, so that no one would compete with you for Victor. Was it you who killed my child? Was it you? I'll kill you. I'll kill you. She completely ignored that she had just undergone surgery and suddenly tried to strangle me. The needle pierced the skin, drawing blood droplets. Doctors and nurses quickly came in and forcibly gave her a sedative injection. I looked at the madwoman before me with pity. After Lillian recovered, she returned home. Victor's mother had long since dismissed the nannies and became even more relentless in tormenting her. A hen that doesn't lay eggs, letting you stay is already an act of mercy. You better stop resembling Victor. If you dare to ruin their marriage again, I'll strip you naked and throw you out. Spread your legs and let them see how promiscuous and shameless you are. Lillian snapped back angrily. If it weren't for you finding some so-called miracle doctor and using all those folk remedies, would the child have died? If you had listened to the doctor and terminated the pregnancy, would I never be able to conceive again? She was like a spring that had been compressed for too long, finally snapping back fiercely. But no matter how hard she pushed back, there was only so much she could do. Victor's mother almost pinned her down on the sofa and beat her. I had watched the commotion long enough before I hurried downstairs and pulled the two apart. Victor also rushed back. As soon as he entered the room, Victor's mother threw herself into tears. My life is so miserable. I gave money to support an ungrateful wretch. And now she wants to hit me? I'm already so old, and I have to suffer this too. I don't want to live anymore. I only want what's best for her. It was so hard to find a miracle doctor to get her medicine, and she didn't even take care of the child herself, yet she blames me. She's truly heartless and ungrateful. Saying this, she showed him the faint scratch mark Lillian had accidentally left while resisting. Victor's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. Mom is already so old. What are you arguing with her about? And you even laid hands on her? Without my mom, would you have what you have today? Mom doesn't understand, and you don't either. You're a medical student, and you got yourself into trouble because of drinking. Who else can you blame? This time, Sister Lillian really went too far. Mom is only doing this for your own good. You can't keep blaming the living because of someone who's dead. I nodded in agreement, just like before, while Victor's mother was making a fuss with me. She looked on coldly, as if watching someone being kicked when they're down. I remember at the time a male colleague gave me a ride home out of the way, and she took a photo of us and showed it to Victor's mother. The next day, she went to the school to cause a scene, saying I was shameless, that I had a husband but was still seducing others, claiming I couldn't stand loneliness and would spread my legs for any man. In the end, I lost my job, and they said I was useless, couldn't even keep my job. Lillian stood by with cold remarks. If you didn't go seducing him, would he have bothered to send you home? Why doesn't he send anyone else home? Auntie is old, just don't upset her anymore. Admit your mistake, apologize, and quietly take care of her at home. Now, it was her turn to be in this situation. Serves her right. Lillian stormed out angrily that day. I was afraid she might do something drastic, so I hurriedly asked Victor to follow her. I don't know what big promises Victor made to her, but when she came back, she sincerely apologized to Victor's mother. The next day, I found out what Victor had promised her. She strutted past me with her new bag, flaring her nostrils at me, and whispered in a voice only the two of us could hear, "I'm going to do great things for Victor, unlike you, who only knows how to serve your husband and please your mother-in-law." I parted my lips, took a bite of the strawberry piece fed by the maid, curled a mocking smile, and looked her up and down. Weren't you pretty eager at first? You rushed to be the mistress, working like a beast of burden for the Sun family, and in the end, you lost the child and still loyally stuck with him. Truly a model in the mistress world. Lillian was left speechless by the retort, tears seemingly flickering in her eyes. In the end, she could only snort coldly, "You won't have many days left to enjoy either." I watched her slam the door and leave, knowing in my heart that they were about to take action. I had been to Victor's pharmaceutical factory once before the wedding. The laboratory was there too, with several staff members inside. There was no way they would be doing those shameful things in a place like that. While staying with Lillian in the hospital, I secretly placed a tracker on her phone. Sure enough, Victor soon couldn't contain himself. Rarely skipping work, he stayed with me to watch a movie he had carefully selected. In the story, the heroine, knowing her days were numbered, made a will leaving all her property to the male lead, a street thug. Victor, with red eyes, wiped away tears, singing praises of their pure love to the fullest. I sank into the sofa, my face hidden in shadow, watching his performance with cold eyes. I can't believe it! If one day I lose you, what should I do? Ivy, we will never be apart for life, right? Yes, I smiled. What a coward. I dared to think it. Without him, life would truly be blissful. But after what happened with Evelyn, I have emotional scars now. You're so good-looking, with top-notch education and family background, and still young. But I'm about to turn 30. If one day you get tired of me, what am I supposed to do? I might as well just die. I replied, no, I won't. I will always be by your side. Until you fall into hell. Until you atone for the mistakes you've made. I still can't feel at ease. How about this? We write an agreement. If you change your heart, all your property will belong to me. I don't mean anything else by it. I'm just too afraid of losing you. I just want some peace of mind. Ivy, you can definitely understand me, right? You're so understanding. After saying that, she threw herself at me and hugged me tightly. I silently watched his performance, hearing the exact same words he used to coax me before. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth as I nodded. All right, but you have to make one too. I'm afraid you'll rekindle things with Lillian. He snorted coldly. Her like that? Fat as a pig, so greasy. The stretch marks on her belly look like they're crawling with centipedes, her skin all wrinkled together, disgusting to death. Just looking at her makes me lose my appetite. How could she compare to even one finger of Ivy's? If it weren't for her brains, which can contribute to our company, I would have kicked her out long ago. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the woman hiding in the stairwell corner, helplessly sitting on the ground. Suppressing the smile in my eyes, I asked worriedly, Victor, you won't treat me like that in the future, right? Definitely not. He raised a finger and swore, if I ever betray Ivy, may I meet a terrible end. Fine, then I'll leave it to you. The next day, Victor anxiously had a lawyer draft the agreement. I looked at the notice that the agreement had taken effect. Great, the net is about to close. From then on, Victor's attitude gradually changed. He started to ignore me, always using overtime as an excuse, sometimes not coming home for days. Yet I didn't make a fuss, only kept saying, husband, you've worked hard. Meanwhile, I grew closer and closer to my adopted brother abroad, at least on the surface. Victor sensed it was tricky. Back then, Evelyn had no relatives at all, so he could manipulate her however he wanted. But I have an adopted brother. If anything happened, he wouldn't dare take any risks when held accountable. So Victor changed his strategy and started acting like a loving husband with me again. Even Lillian's expression has improved a lot when she sees me recently. I opened the eavesdropping software. I've developed a new drug that, when taken long-term, can cause organ failure and death. Then, once the drug is stopped, it can't be detected. Have you tested it? Are you sure it's safe? Victor asked. All 3 test subjects were fine. Nothing showed up in any tests. Good. Give me the drug. I'll put it in her milk. Meanwhile, the door opened. I quickly pressed the flush button and went out. It was Victor, handing me the milk. Drink it while it's warm. I smiled and took it. Why did you bring it? Where's Liane? Liane was the newly hired nanny. She's not feeling well. I let her rest, I said without suspicion, bringing the cup to my lips. Out of the corner of my eye, he was staring intently. Just as I was about to drink, I suddenly stopped. What's wrong? There's something dirty floating on the surface, I said, pointing it out to him. A flicker of guilt and nervousness passed through his eyes. Maybe it's a bug. I'll pour you another cup. As he turned to leave, I quickly turned on the pinhole camera installed in the kitchen. I saw Victor close the door, then from a very hidden corner, take out a dark brown bottle and drop a tiny bit of powder into it. I turned off my phone, lay down on the bed, and when he arrived, I took the milk and drank it in one gulp. Only after seeing me finish did he finally turn around and go to the office. As soon as Victor left, I immediately ran to the bathroom and forced myself to vomit by poking the back of my throat. Meanwhile, a bold plan began to take shape in my mind. I found an identical bottle and swapped it with the one containing the medicine. The real medicine, wrapped in cloth, was poured into Lillian's protein powder. She was now working out every day and drinking protein powder to lose weight. I didn't expect the drug to be so potent. After less than 2 months of drinking it, she began to show symptoms. At first, she lost a lot of weight, 50 pounds in just 1 month, and she thought it was the diet pills working. It wasn't until things got worse that she went to the hospital for a checkup. The results showed organ failure caused by drug abuse. Lillian came back pale-faced, holding the test report, looking like a walking corpse. Seeing Victor and me sitting on the sofa, cozy and intimate, she suddenly exploded like a bear, rushed over, threw the report in his face, grabbed his collar, and questioned him heart-wrenchingly. Did you give me the medicine? Did you? How could you do this to me? And you even lied to me saying it was for her. How have I wronged you? I've been with you since college. I gave up better offers, wholeheartedly started the company with you, stayed up late every day doing experiments until I fainted. Even the child was killed by your mother. And you treat me like this. Victor. Lillian sobbed bitterly, every word dripping with pain. Victor didn't even look up, harshly pushed her to the ground, his eyes filled with a storm. What kind of nonsense are you spouting? If you're sick, go get treated. Don't act crazy outside. Did I ever ask you to do those things? You came to me on your own. Who can you blame? Lillian sat stunned in place, then suddenly burst into laughter, her clothes disheveled, looking like a madwoman. She suddenly turned to me, with a sense of throwing in the towel. Ivy, Where do you think you can get better? How's your grandmother's health recently? Her words were cut off. Lillian looked like a cat with its neck squeezed, her eyes wide open staring at him. Then she weakly lowered her head, unable to struggle any further. I don't know what you've been shouting about since you got back. Saying this, Victor picked up the report from the floor, but before he could read it, his phone rang in his pocket. He answered, and after hearing what was said on the other end, his expression gradually darkened. Hanging up, he headed for the door. At the doorway, he turned back, grabbed Lillian by the head, and dragged her outside, completely ignoring her screams and struggles. Gritting his teeth, he said, "You really have ruined me." I lazily leaned back on the sofa, watching this farce unfold. By the afternoon, I understood why Victor was so furious. On the live broadcast on TV, he indignantly condemned himself for trusting Lillian so much and handing over full control of the laboratory to her. But she was secretly deceiving homeless people into unethical human experiments. Countless questions and microphones were thrust in front of Lillian, but she just kept her head down in silence until the police took her away. Because of this incident, the company's stock plummeted sharply. Victor painfully funded several charity projects and bought a lot of online trolls to suppress the matter. Lillian was detained, and the impact of this incident was significant and serious. I had to work very hard to get a visit to see her. She looked even more haggard, her cheeks deeply sunken, almost skin clinging to bone, with eyes filled with a dead, hopeless look. Seeing me didn't even stir the slightest reaction. Here to laugh at me, she spoke, her voice like sandpaper scraping. I took out my phone from my pocket and turned it on. It was a video. A young girl stood by the bedside of an elderly person with white hair, tenderly feeding her. "When is Lillian coming?" the old man asked. "Lillian has been busy in the lab lately. She'll come when she has time." The old man nodded and then started rambling again about how accomplished Lillian was, the first girl in the village to get into university, and that too the best university. After watching the video, Lillian cried uncontrollably. "I beg you, you can do whatever you want to me, just don't bully my grandmother." I sarcastically suppressed my smile. Unexpectedly, even someone as venomous as her had a soft spot she was afraid of. Victor stopped the support payments and kicked her out. I was the one who saved her. Lillian was stunned, then gritted her teeth and said, "He promised me. As long as I acknowledge it alone, he will treat my grandmother well." I sneered. "You actually still believe his words? What do you want? Aren't you very close with him?" "I want him to be disgraced. I want his reputation ruined, and I want the Dishing company." "You're smart. You know what to do." After saying this, I got up and left without waiting for her reply. Victor once again made the news headlines. The great philanthropist is actually the mastermind behind human experiments. Lillian provided extremely important clues, and the police immediately went to the company to make arrests. Victor pretended to cooperate, but when no one was paying attention, he turned and ran away. Not long after, someone came to the house to keep watch and monitor my phone. He was very clever and never contacted me. Out of necessity, I took on the company's responsibilities and, with the help of my foster brother, managed to save the crumbling empire. Another 6 months passed, and police supervision gradually loosened. When I came home from work and opened the door, I saw Victor sitting at the dining table, wolfing down food. His face was covered in dust and dirt, his hair tangled into a messy bun on top of his head, and he was wearing some ragged coat picked up from who knows where. In the dead of winter, barefoot, leaving all the dirty mud on my carpet worth hundreds of thousands. I poured him a glass of water. He gulped it down. "Ivy, you have no idea how I've been these past 6 months. No, I need to take a shower." After saying that, he stood up. But after a few steps, he suddenly collapsed with a thud. Victor woke up quickly, but his whole body was weak and limp. He looked at me in terror. "What are you going to do?" "Ivy, I'm Brother Victor. Don't you recognize me?" "Of course I do." I toyed with the blade, a sharp cold gleam flashing before my eyes, filled with murderous intent. My dear husband, we've been married for 2 lifetimes. How could I not recognize you? What? What do you mean? Victor's eyes widened in horror. Don't you remember me? I tilted my head, pulling back my lips to reveal a set of sharp white teeth. I'm Evelyn. Impossible. She died long ago. I suddenly stomped on his lower body, watching him scream in unbearable agony. You killed my parents, destroyed my children, and even killed me. You spread rumors that I was caught cheating and jumped to my death. Heaven has eyes. Let me live again. The stains spread across the carpet. He was so scared he wet himself. Victor's voice trembled, tears and snot flying everywhere. It was all that bitch Lillian's idea. I never intended to kill you. I really love you. Evelyn, please forgive me, okay? I'll work like a beast to make it up to you. Please. I looked on coldly. Back then, I begged you the same way. But he just pushed me away, saying, go ahead, don't worry. So now, I return those words to him. I clapped my hands, and from the dark corner, someone stepped out. It was Lillian. She was already skin and bones, her eyes filled with a hatred that ate away at her soul. I sat down on the sofa, and she held a cup, feeding me water. I hope you keep your promise. Of course. Before losing consciousness, at the edge of my vision, Lillian stabbed Victor frantically. The sound of the knife stabbing into the flesh, and then being pulled out fell into my ears, composing a symphony of death. When I opened my eyes again, I was already lying in the hospital, with the servant Lien crying sadly by my side. Seeing that I had woken up, she hurriedly called the doctor and the police. After the doctor finished the examination and found no problems, they took my statement. After work, I came home, and as soon as I turned on the light, I saw Victor sitting in the house. He threatened me not to call the police. I clenched my hands tightly, my pupils filled with fear. At the back, we said we needed to talk. I drank the water placed on the coffee table, and soon after, I felt dizzy. When I woke up, I was here. After finishing the statement, the police asked a few more questions before telling me what happened next. Lien went back to the villa to get something and ran into Lillian committing the crime. Seeing someone coming, she set a fire and ran out the back door. Lien hurriedly called the police and dragged me out. Lillian had poured gasoline beforehand, so the fire spread quickly, engulfing half the sky in no time. By the time the police arrived, it was already impossible to go in and rescue anyone. After the fire was extinguished, Victor was already dead cold. According to the preliminary forensic examination, he had over 200 stab wounds, but none were fatal. He was burned alive. He must have suffered immense pain before dying. 3 days later, the police found Lillian's body in the river. The case was closed at that point. After I was discharged from the hospital, I bought a newspaper and went to the nursing home. When I opened the door, the room was filled with a stench. The woman on the bed cursed loudly, "Ivy, you bitch, unfilial child, may you be struck by lightning. When Victor comes back, I will make sure he kills you." Since the Victor human experiment incident broke out, she had a stroke in her agitation. She could only lie paralyzed in bed. I found the nursing home with the worst reputation and sent her there. The caregivers either beat her or ignored her. Her bed was soiled with feces and urine, and it was only changed every few days. The area she was constantly soaked in developed sores and maggots, but no one cared. I threw the newspaper onto her face. "Look, your dear Victor, what kind of end he met." She glanced at it, then her eyes rolled back and she fainted. I left the room and handed money to the caregiver. "Please, Auntie, take good care of my mother-in-law." When the first message arrived, I embellished the story of Victor's mother in every detail. The caregiver had also suffered hardships and especially hated wicked mothers-in-law. So, Victor's mother still had many good days ahead. I hummed happily as I drove to my parents' graves. The great revenge was avenged, and I wanted to share this good news with them. My good days were still ahead as well.